I am Major Laura Hall, 34 years old. 11 days ago, I sold the rights to my software system to a defense conglomerate for $14 million. That evening, my husband looked at me across the dinner table and said something that changed everything. Tell your family the deal fell through. I did exactly that. Within 4 days, my mother listed my childhood bedroom on Airbnb, $89 a night. The room still has the window seat I built myself when I was 16. By day 7, my sister texted me to strike my name from her wedding guest list. The reason? Mom said a bankrupt sister showing up empty-handed would make the whole family look bad. My father has been radio silent, but the reason I'm sitting here telling this story is because of what happened on day 12, when I personally transferred $50,000 to each of them. How they handled that money in the next 18 hours was truly devastating. Welcome to Noble Revenge, where the most brutal family truths are exposed. If you have ever sacrificed everything only to be treated like a tool, hit like, leave a comment below where you are listening from, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single new story. Tuesday in Naperville, Illinois is usually quiet. The kind of quiet that feels expensive. Outside, the sprinklers were probably hitting the manicured lawns of the neighbors. But inside my kitchen, the air was thick and smelled like old dish soap and cold reality. The Harmon Kale contract sat on the granite island, a thick stack of paper that represented 3 years of coding and a lifetime of looking over my shoulder. $14 million. One lump sum. I picked up a pen to sign the final transfer. It wasn't a fancy fountain pen. It was a shitty, chewed-up black ballpoint I'd bought at a Shell gas station for $4 on my way home. The ink smeared slightly on the tail of the H in Hall. Beside the million sat the real reason I was tired. A separate pile of papers held together by a rusted paperclip. My father's country club renewal notice, the property tax bill for my grandmother's house, a stack of urgent invoices for Kelsey's bridal shower. 8 years. That is how long I had been the invisible backbone of this family. Every cent I had ever sent home was hazard pay. Dirty money. Money earned while wearing 30 pounds of plates in a sandbox, listening for the high-pitched whistle of incoming mortars. I had traded my sleep and my sanity so they could live a soft life in the suburbs. It is signed, I said. My voice sounded like gravel. Garrett walked into the kitchen. He didn't bring a bouquet. He didn't start a celebratory chant. He just set a bottle of champagne on the glass table. It was a $32 bottle from the grocery store down the street. The pop of the cork was the only loud thing in the room, a sharp crack that reminded me of a small caliber round hitting a wall. He didn't look at the contract. He looked at the phone in my hand. My thumb was already hovering over my mother's contact. I wanted to hear her say it. Just once. I am proud of you, Laura. You did it, honey. Garrett's hand caught my wrist. His grip was firm, warm, and steady. He is a risk analyst. He spends his days measuring the probability of a disaster before the first tremor hits. Laura, hold on, he said. His voice was low, surgical. When was the last time any of them called this phone without a routing number attached to the conversation? When did Diane last ask if you were sleeping through the night, if you were okay? I stopped. The question hit me harder than any training exercise ever had. I went back through months of call logs in my head, missed calls from my dad, asking for the golf club pin, text from Kelsey, demanding a deposit for the florist. There was nothing else, not a single, "How are you?" I was a daughter on paper, but in reality, I was just a line of credit with a military rank. I am her daughter, Garrett, I whispered, though the words felt hollow. Are you? He asked, letting go of my wrist. Or are you just the most reliable asset they have left to liquidate? He pulled 2 glasses from the cabinet. Try a different mission, tactical recon. Tell them the deal died. Tell them you are broke. See who shows up to help you off the floor. I hated the idea. In the army, your word is your life. Deception is a tool for the enemy, not the people you share Thanksgiving turkey with. But the ache in my chest was turning into a cold, hard knot. I needed to know the truth. I opened the group chat, Hall Family Updates. I didn't overthink it. I typed it fast, the way I used to report troop movements. The deal fell through. Everything is gone. I am facing a major financial crisis, and I don't know what to do. This week has been hell. I hit send. The sound of the outgoing message was a dry, metallic chirp. I placed the phone face down on the cold glass. We sat there. We didn't talk. 1 minute passed. In the military, if a unit broadcasts a distress signal, the medevac is in the air in 3 minutes. They will fly through a goddamn sandstorm to get to you. They will die to get you home. 5 minutes. The bubbles in the cheap champagne glasses were slowly dying, rising to the surface and vanishing into nothing. 10 minutes. The hum of the refrigerator felt like a roar in the silence. Naperville was quiet, but this was a different kind of quiet. This was the sound of a vacuum. At exactly 14 minutes, the screen lit up. A harsh flash of white light against the dark table. Mom! My heart did a stupid, hopeful little skip. My fingers felt numb as I reached for the device. It wasn't a call. She didn't want to hear my voice. It was a single text. No, are you okay? No, come over for dinner. No, we will figure it out, she wrote. Oh no. So does this mean you are still covering the peonies and the catering for Kelsey's wedding? She is literally hysterical right now because the florist needs the final check. I stared at the screen until the words blurred into black dots. The peonies, the damn flowers. My sister was crying over petals while I was supposedly losing my life's work. I looked at Garrett. He didn't say, I told you so. He didn't have to. The champagne on the table was flat, dead. Mission confirmed, I said. My voice didn't shake this time. It was the voice of an officer who had just identified a threat. The decommissioning of the Hall family had officially begun. Wednesday morning in Illinois arrived with a gray, indifferent sky. I sat at the kitchen island, staring at a bowl of cold oatmeal I couldn't swallow. My phone sat next to it, dead silent. Not a single call followed my bankruptcy text. No. Are you okay, Laura? No. Do you need a place to stay? Just avoid. But my mother's social media was screaming. I scrolled through Diane's Instagram stories. The blue light from the screen made my eyes ache. There she was, Michigan Avenue, Chicago, a high-end bridal boutique. Diane was holding a crystal flute of mimosa, her face glowing with a filtered tan. Kelsey stood behind her, draped in layers of silk and lace that probably cost more than a mid-sized sedan. The caption read, Mother of the Bride Energy. Only the best for my little princess. I looked at my own hands. The knuckles were scarred from 8 years of loading crates and securing perimeters. There was no princess energy here. Only the grit of a logistics officer who had forgotten what it felt like to be taken care of. At 8 p.m., the phone finally buzzed. My father, Roger. I took a deep breath, clearing the gravel from my throat, bracing for a word of comfort. Laura, his voice came through, rushed and hollow. What is the PIN for the country club membership? I am standing at the pro shop, and I can't remember the damn code. I leaned back against the cold granite. He didn't ask about the company. He didn't mention the crisis. Check your email, Dad. I sent it last month. Right. Your mother is calling for dinner. Gotta go. The line went dead. No goodbye. Just the sharp click of a man who viewed his eldest daughter as a walking technical support desk. Day 2 was worse. A text arrived from Kelsey. Exactly 47 words. Cold. Professional. Not a single emoji. Mom told me about your situation. Sucks. But look, you still need to finalize the peony order with the florist today. The wedding is the biggest day of my life, Laura. I can't have the centerpieces looking cheap because you are stressed. Figure it out. I put the phone down and opened my call logs. I stared at them with the eyes of an intelligence officer. In the last 8 months, there were 43 calls from home. I scrolled through each one. Call 1, the roof is leaking, send a contractor. Call 12, Dad needs his golf fees covered. Call 30. Confirm the catering menu for the rehearsal dinner, 43 calls. 0 minutes spent asking if I was okay. I wasn't a daughter, I was a free subcontractor. I had an infinite list of obligations and zero equity in the family I was keeping afloat. I closed my eyes and the smell of pine hit me. It was a sensory flashback, sharp as a bayonet, 16 years old. Kelsey was 10, dressed in a pink tutu for her private ballet lessons. My mother was driving her to the studio in a car I'd spent the weekend washing and waxing. I stayed behind in the garage. The garage was my only fortress. It was filled with my father's rusted tools he never used because he didn't want to get grease under his fingernails. I spent 3 months of my summer in that sweltering heat. I hauled scrap pine from a construction site down the road. I measured, I sawed, I sanded until my palms bled and my lungs felt like they were coated in fine white dust. I was building a window seat for my bedroom. A place where I could sit and look at the sky and pretend I was somewhere else, anywhere else. I remember the day I finished it. I was proud. My fingers were raw and the smell of sawdust was caked into my hair. My mother walked into the room. She didn't look at the craftsmanship. She didn't see the way the joints fit perfectly. She just looked at the rug. "You got sawdust on the carpet, Laura," she snapped. "Clean this mess up. You are making the house look like a construction zone." That was the pattern. Kelsey got the ballet shoes. I got the sandpaper. Kelsey got the applause. I got the cleaning bill. The vibration of the phone on the glass table snapped me back to the present. It wasn't my family. It was Jess, my old sergeant from Fort Bragg. "Laura," the message read, "I just saw this. You need to look." There was a link, an Airbnb listing. I tapped the screen. My stomach did a violent flip, the kind you get when a plane hits a sudden air pocket. The title read, "Cozy Suburban Retreat. Former daughter's room, newly renovated, quiet space." The pictures were of my childhood bedroom. The window seat I had built with my own blood and sweat was there, draped in a cheap white throw. But the wooden plaque that said Laura on the door was gone. In its place, on the bed I had slept in for 18 years, was a stiff, white, decorative pillow. It had one word embroidered on it: guest. My mother hadn't waited 48 hours. The moment she thought I was no longer a source of income, she had erased my existence and put a price tag on my sanctuary: $89 a night. That was my value to Diane Hall. If you have ever felt like the only person holding the hammer while everyone else took the credit, hit that like button right now. It is time we stopped being invisible. Drop a comment below with the word asset if you have ever been treated like a tool instead of a human being. I want to see how many of us are standing together in this fight. Subscribe now because the reckoning is just getting started. I stared at that pillow. The word guest felt like a physical blow to the ribs. My mother hadn't just listed a room. She had declared war on my identity. I picked up the red pen Garrett had left on the counter. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just opened my bank statements from the last 8 years. If they wanted to run this family like a business, I was about to show them exactly what a hostile takeover looked like. My phone rang again. This time, it was my father. And he wasn't asking for a PIN. He was barking a command that would change the rules of the game forever. The blue light from the smartphone screen felt like a laser cutting through my retinas. I sat at the glass kitchen table in the dark, the hum of the refrigerator the only company I had. My fingers were cold. I used 2 fingers to zoom in on the image. The digital pixels snapped into a sharp, painful focus. There was the hallway. The cream-colored paint I rolled on 10 summers ago while my father watched from the couch. And there was the door. My door. The listing was titled Cozy Suburban Retreat. It didn't mention the girl who grew up there. It didn't mention the officer who sent half her paycheck home for 8 years to keep the mortgage from drowning. Former daughter's room, newly renovated, quiet space. Price, $89 a night. My eyes moved to the door frame. The small wooden plaque was gone. The one I'd carved my name into when I was 7. Diane had ripped it down, sanded the wood until the grooves of my childhood were gone, painted over the history. Then I saw the bed. My mattress, the one I used to hide under during storms. My mother had staged it like a goddamn hotel. Crisp white linens, a polyester rug, and right in the center, a stiff decorative pillow, stark white. It had one word embroidered on it in black thread. Guest. In less than 48 hours after hearing my business failed, she had scrubbed the Laura out of the house. I wasn't family. I was a vacancy, a revenue stream. The air in the kitchen felt thin, like I was back in the mountains of the Middle East. I closed my eyes. The smell of Naperville vanished. Fallujah. 2016. The heat was a living thing, heavy and tasting of diesel and ancient dust. We were in a hangar. Mortars were screaming overhead, that high-pitched whistle that tells you the sky is falling. I was on a medical stretcher because there were no chairs. The canvas was stained with someone else's blood, dried into a dark map of misery. I'd imagined this room back then. I'd imagined the window seat I built. The safety of a house that didn't shake when the ground exploded. My unit, people I'd only known for months, would have crawled through a minefield to pull me out. We were a family built on lead and loyalty. We didn't leave anyone behind. I thought the people back home were the same. I thought blood meant more than a check. I opened my eyes. The Naperville kitchen was still dark. In Iraq, the enemy wore a different uniform. They shot from the shadows. Here, the enemy wore pearls and posted energy updates on Instagram. They didn't shoot. They just listed your sanctuary for $89 a night. She didn't do it to hurt you, Laura. Garrett's voice was a cold splash of water. He was in the doorway, his silhouette blocking the hall light. He didn't offer a hug. He knew I was a ticking bomb of military discipline. No. My voice was a flatline. No, he said, stepping in. He leaned against the counter. She's just reallocating assets. You're a logistics officer. When a supply line goes dry, you decommission the route. You repurpose the infrastructure. He looked at the guest pillow on the screen. To Diane, you weren't a daughter who just lost everything. You were a unit of production that ceased to produce. You lost your commission. So, you lost your room. It's not malice, it's a liquidation. The words were a serrated blade. Guest. A stranger was sleeping in my bed tonight. Someone with a credit card would sit on the window seat I'd sanded until my fingers bled. They would look at the Illinois sky while my mother calculated the profit margins over her morning coffee. The knot in my chest froze. It turned into something hard. I didn't cry. Tears are for people who still have hope. I was done being heard. I wanted to be felt. I stood up, back straight, shoulders squared. I felt the old weight of the body armor. I felt the focus of a mission briefing. I pulled the top drawer of the desk open. It groaned, a low metallic protest. I grabbed a heavy leather-bound folder. 8 years of bank statements. Every emergency fund. Every loan. Every gift I'd sent to the Hall family. I pulled out a red felt-tip pen. If they wanted a business relationship, I was about to give them an audit they would never forget. I was going to account for every cent of hazard pay I'd bled for. I clicked the pen. The sound was a hammer hitting a firing pin. I sat down and opened the first page, 2018. The year I paid for Roger's bypass surgery because his insurance didn't cover the specialist. The year I worked 20-hour shifts in the sand so he could have a second chance. I drew a thick red line through the total. The silence was sharp. It was the silence before the first shot. The phone on the glass table erupted. A violent rattling. Dad! Roger's voice didn't sound like a father's. It sounded like a commander reading an execution order. Laura, he barked. Listen good. Your mother just told me about the Airbnb. Don't you dare call her and start a scene. We have the wedding to think about. We have a reputation. If you can't contribute, stay out of the way. He took a sharp breath. I need you at the house tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. sharp. The guests are arriving and the lawn service fell through. You know how to run the commercial mower. Be there. Do the job. Don't make me ask twice. The line went dead. I looked at the black screen, then I looked at the red pen. The audit just got a lot more expensive. The silence of a winter morning in Naperville, Illinois, is heavy. It presses against the window panes like a debt that can never be fully repaid. I sat in the dim kitchen, my fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug. The steam from the black coffee was the only movement in the room. No sugar, no cream, just bitter heat. The world outside was a sheet of gray. Bare trees, frozen dirt, everything dormant, waiting for a thaw that I knew was not coming. I watched the frost crawl across the glass. The phone vibrated on the table, a violent rattle. It cut through the stillness like a siren. I did not rush to answer it. I watched the screen glow. Roger Hall, my father. I picked it up. I did not say hello. I just waited. I heard the faint sound of a television in the background. "Laura," he said. His voice was a dry rasp, a hollow sound. "Your mother and I are looking at the books for the wedding. The numbers are tight. You understand the situation, right? We have to think about the family name. The optics matter." I did not answer. Silence is a weapon. He cleared his throat. I heard the phone being passed, a rustle of expensive silk. "Laura," Kelsey said. Her voice was sharp. "Mom says if you come without a gift, people will talk. It will be awkward for the guests. With your company crisis, I think it is better if you just sit this one out, for the sake of the family. To avoid the embarrassment of a sister who has nothing. We will send photos. It is for the best." The line went dead. I did not fight. I tapped the red icon. 4 months. That is how long I had spent as a ghost. I had negotiated the floral contracts. I had secured the venue. I had bullied the caterers into submission. Thousands of hours of logistical precision, all for free. To them, my sweat was not currency. Only cash mattered. Because the bank account was dry, I was a broken part, a defect in the machine. Garrett pulled out a chair. He did not offer a hug. He placed a paper on the table, a diagram, a corporate structure. "Your family is a business, Laura," he said. He tapped the page. Diane Hall, Chief Executive Officer. Kelsey, the Public Relations Department. Roger, the courier. He traced a line to a box at the bottom. You, the infrastructure, the heavy lifter. He looked at me. His eyes were hard. "You just got your pink slip. You were laid off because the revenue stopped. They do not want a daughter. They want a donor for their lifestyle." I dropped my head into my hands. My palms felt like sandpaper. The injustice was a weight, a stone in my gut. A fresh cup of coffee appeared. Garrett stood there like a wall, a barrier. He did not speak. He just existed. The phone shook again. A video call. Nora, my old sergeant. I swiped the screen. Her face was flushed. She looked like she wanted to punch a hole through the internet. "Are you holding up, Captain?" she asked. She used the rank, reminding me of the metal I was made of. I saw the story Diane posted. She is bragging about the designer dress. Not a word about you, not a word about your loss. It is like you do not even exist in their world. I took a sip of the coffee. Scalding. Perfect. "I am uninvited, Nora," I said. My voice was level, flat. Nora let out a string of curses. "To hell with them," she snapped. "Laura, check your inbox. Now." I was going to keep this to myself because I did not want to hurt you. But you need to see who they really are. You need to see the shadow world they built. I opened the message. It was a series of screenshots, a group chat, Hall family updates. There were 5 members: my mother, my father, Kelsey, Aunt Sarah, Uncle Tom. My name was nowhere. The first message was dated 2 years ago. 2 years of planning, 2 years of birthdays. Discussed in a room I was never allowed to enter. I had been an outsider long before I became bankrupt. I had been a tool they used to build a house I was never meant to live in. I saw a message from Diane complaining about my cold personality while asking for my money. I saw Kelsey joking about my military boots and my lack of style. I looked at the black coffee. The steam had stopped. The liquid was a dark mirror. I saw my reflection, the officer, the woman who was done being a guest. "Mission parameters have changed," I whispered. I reached for the red pen. The audit was no longer about money. It was about the total liquidation of a toxic empire. I counted the years of hazard pay. I counted the sleepless nights. Each red line was a nail in the coffin of their comfort. They wanted a ghost. Now they were going to get one that haunted their bank accounts. I started with the golf club fees, then the catering deposit. I was taking it all back, every cent, every hour of my life. The reckoning was mine. The glare from the smartphone screen was a white, clinical burn in the dark of my living room. I sat paralyzed by the data on the screen. The Hall family updates group chat. 5 members, not me. I scrolled through the messages from 2 days ago. It was a cold autopsy of my life performed by the people who shared my DNA. No one in that thread was grieving for my loss. They were calculating the damage to their own comfort. My mother, Diane, had started it at 10 a.m. Laura's company hit a wall, she wrote. Her tone was as dry as a foreclosure notice. Everything is gone. She is officially out of the contribution loop for the wedding fund. Extremely disappointing. We are going to have to cut corners on the open bar and the floral arrangements. Kelsey's response came in hot 30 seconds later. Wait, seriously? So do I have to find a new florist now? She didn't prepay the whole package? This is literally ruining my week. I have enough stress with the dress fittings. Then came the closer. Diane's final word on the matter. I am listing her old room on Airbnb tonight. There is no reason to have a dead asset sitting in the house when it isn't generating income. Roger is moving her boxes to the garage to make space for the luggage rack. No one asked if I was eating. No one asked if I had a place to go. They weren't discussing a daughter or a sister in crisis. They were discussing a broken supply line, a faulty piece of equipment that had stopped producing. I was a decommissioned unit. Then, the vibration, a new notification, a private message from the princess herself. Hey sis, I know you are going through a lot right now. Sucks. But can you do me a huge favor? Call the shop and finalize the design for the peonies. The owner is being a prick and they only listen to you. They are scared of you, LOL. Help me out? Love you. I stared at the screen until the love you felt like a physical stain on my soul. They had kicked me out of the ceremony, erased my name from the guest list, and put a price tag on my childhood bed. But they still wanted my bark. They still wanted the major to handle the dirty work. They wanted the extraction of my skill without the cost of my presence. They wanted the soldier to march, even after they'd taken away her rank and her home. I didn't reply. I grabbed my car keys. My grip was tight. The drive to Naperville was a blur of gray asphalt and cold wind. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house. It felt like trespassing in a place I'd helped pay for since I was 22. The house was empty. I knew the schedule. They were at the final dress fitting for Kelsey, a 3-hour event involving champagne and fake smiles. I let myself in. The air inside smelled of vanilla candles and old secrets. Everything was in its place. Every cushion was fluffed. Every lie was tucked away. I went to the garage first. My boxes were there, stacked haphazardly next to my father's golf clubs. They looked like trash waiting for the curb. I needed packing tape to seal the few memories I was allowed to keep. I walked into my father's office. It was a room I'd been banned from for most of my childhood. It smelled of expensive tobacco. I checked the top drawers of the mahogany desk. Nothing but pens and country club scorecards. I reached for the bottom drawer, a heavy oak piece that groaned as I pulled it open. There was no tape. There was a blue plastic folder. The label was written in my mother's neat, cursive script, Family Management. My training took over. I sat in the leather chair and opened the folder. It wasn't a scrap box of family memories. It was a ledger, a stack of Excel sheets. I flipped to the most recent page. The black ink was sharp and uncompromising. It was a spreadsheet. 4 columns: name, inflow, outflow, balance. I found my name. Outflow, property taxes, 2020 to 2024. Roger's bypass surgery, Kelsey's student loans, golf membership, irrigation system, luxury kitchen remodel. Inflow, Thanksgiving dinner, 2022. Birthday gift card, $85. Balance plus $412,000. Underneath my entry, in the notes column, Diane had written in her perfect handwriting, exceeding expectations, high yield asset, Maintain current demands. Do not disclose total balance. I moved my eyes down to Kelsey. Inflow. Wedding fund, $80,000. Sorority dues. New car down payment. Weekly manicure allowance. Outflow. Instagram tags. Public perception. Balance minus $114,000. Notes. Meeting image targets, high maintenance but vital for social standing, covered by Laura's overflow. The silence in the office was deafening. I felt a cold, metallic clarity. I wasn't a person in this house. I was a stock. I was a high-yield investment being liquidated the moment the market turned. Every penny of hazard pay I'd earned in the dirt of Iraq had been logged and used to balance the debt of a sister who didn't even want me at her wedding. I wasn't a daughter. I was a line item on a balance sheet. I looked at the notes again. Maintain current demands. They were planning to bleed me until I was a hollow shell. They had been tracking my yield since I was 18. They'd turned my trauma and my hard work into a spreadsheet. I didn't feel the sting of tears. I felt the cold click of a magazine being loaded. The family management folder was my weapon. It was the smoking gun. My mother didn't love me. She loved my liquidity. I folded the folder shut and slid it under my arm. I didn't take the tape. I didn't take my boxes. Those things were relics of a woman who was dead. I walked out of the front door and locked it behind me. The Illinois air felt sharp. I walked to my car, the folder heavy against my ribs. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. Not my mother. Not Kelsey. Claudia? It's Laura Hall, I said. My voice was the voice of a major on a mission. I have the ledger. I want to start the audit. Every cent, every bill. No exceptions. I want to call in the debt. I sat in the driver's seat and watched the house in the rearview mirror. The safety was off. The Hall family had no idea the debt was about to be paid in full. Day 10 of the mission was spent in a room that smelled of old oak and cold justice. I sat across from Claudia. Her office in downtown Chicago felt like a fortress. No vanilla candles here, no Instagram filters, just the heavy weight of the law. I pushed the $14 million contract across the desk. Beside it, I laid the blue folder from my father's office, the ledger of my life as an asset. I want an irrevocable trust, I said. My voice was steady. $500,000 for each of my children. Garrett and I hold the keys. My parents, they don't get a cent. No vote, no influence. I am building a wall, Claudia, a high one. Claudia didn't blink. She was a mercenary with a JD. She picked up a rubber stamp. It was heavy, black, and carried the weight of finality. Thud. The sound echoed in the quiet room. And a scholarship fund, I continued. $25,000 a year. For the kids who are the primary caregivers. The ones who are the invisible infrastructure for families that treat them like tools. My children will never be a line item on a spreadsheet. They will never be a donor for someone else's status. Thud. Another stamp. Another brick in the wall. Day 11 was the night of the rehearsal dinner. The air in Naperville was thick with the scent of lilies and desperation. 68 guests. They were sitting under lights I had designed, using silver I'd negotiated the price on, eating food I'd coordinated while I was counting pennies in the dark. I checked the Instagram tags. Kelsey was in the center of every frame, the princess in white. She was laughing, her head tilted back, a flute of champagne in her hand. Diane was beside her, the CEO of the facade, beaming for the cameras. They were celebrating a union built on the back of a sister they had discarded. I was in my home, my office. It was dark. The only light came from the red folder on my desk. I had titled it Decommissioning Papers. It was a tactical record of betrayal. Inside were the Airbnb screenshots, the uninvited text, the secret logs from the Hall family updates thread, and the KPI ledger. The evidence was cold, silent. A sniper rifle in a locked room, waiting for the target to walk into the crosshairs. Morning of day 12, 6 a.m. The kitchen was cold. The Illinois winter was trying to find a way through the glass. I didn't turn on the heat. I liked the bite of the air. It kept me sharp. I walked to the refrigerator. The wedding invitation was still there, held by a heart-shaped magnet. The cardstock was heavy, cream-colored, gold-embossed letters. The wedding of Kelsey Hall. I used to look at that invite and feel pride. I thought my sacrifice was the glue holding the family together. I reached out and peeled it off. The magnet hit the floor with a tiny metallic clink. I held the invitation in my hand. I felt the texture of the gold. It didn't feel like a celebration anymore. It felt like a summons, a bill for a life I didn't want to buy. I didn't tear it. I didn't throw it in the fire. That would have been too loud. I let it slide into the recycling bin. It hit the bottom with a dry, hollow sound, a scrap of paper in a bin of plastic. The connection was severed. The contract was null. 6:15 a.m. I sat on the sofa in my gray wool coat, stiff and professional. Garrett placed a glass of water on the side table. He didn't speak. He stood by the window, watching the sun break through the clouds. I opened the banking app. The balance was a mountain. $14,028,500. The digital numbers on the screen were a stark green. I navigated to the transfer screen. I selected the payees: Diane Hall, Roger Hall, Kelsey Hall. I typed in the amount, $50,000 each, $150,000 total. To them, it would look like a miracle, a payout, a chance to fix the crisis. To me, it was a severance package. I was paying them to leave my life. I was buying my freedom with the coins they valued most. I moved to the memo line. The cursor blinked, a steady, rhythmic beat. Severance pay for 9 years of unpaid service. I took a deep breath. I felt the cold Illinois air fill my lungs. I felt the focus of a major on the brink of an assault. I didn't hesitate. My thumb hit confirm. The phone gave a small, dry chirp, a notification that the mission was live, the funds were gone, the bomb was in the air. I placed the phone face down on the coffee table. I picked up the water and took a sip. It was cold, clean. I set the glass down. "The funds are moved," I said. Garrett looked at me. "Are you ready for the fallout?" I stood up and smoothed my coat. "I am the one who designed the impact zone, Garrett. I am ready." The decommissioning of the Hall family was no longer a plan. It was a reality. And the silence in the room was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. 07:22 hours. The shockwave hit. I was sitting in my kitchen, the same gray light of Naperville filtering through the blinds. I hadn't slept. I didn't need to. I had the kind of clarity that only comes when you are sitting behind a sniper scope, waiting for the wind to drop. The phone on the granite island didn't just vibrate, it jumped. A violent, rattling dance against the stone. It was a text from Roger, my father. "Laura, what the hell is this? $50,000 just hit my checking account. Where did this come from?" Notice the phrasing. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask if the crisis had been a mistake. He didn't ask if I had sold my soul to a loan shark in a back alley. He only saw the zeros. The greed was a scent, thick and musky, even through a digital screen. 07:41 hours. The second wave. Kelsey's name flashed on iMessage. "Why did you send me money? I thought you were bankrupt. Mom says you're acting crazy. Did you get a loan? Because I still need the final check for the open bar." I didn't reply. In the field, when a grenade goes off in a confined space, you don't run inside to see the damage. You wait. You let the smoke settle. You let the ringing in their ears turn into a scream. I poured myself another glass of water. Cold. Hard. I watched the condensation crawl down the glass like a slow-motion tear. 08:03 hours. The commander-in-chief arrived. Diane called. 6 times in a row. I didn't pick up. I just watched the screen light up the kitchen like a strobe light. My phone was a live wire, and I was the only one with the insulation. Then the Hall family updates group chat. The digital room where I had been a ghost for 2 years became a war zone. "Aunt Sarah, what is going on? Diane is hysterical. Something about a deposit?" My mother's typing bubble was a constant, frantic pulse. "Diane. She has lost her mind. She sent us all money and called it a severance. She's trying to ruin Kelsey's morning. She's trying to buy her way back into a family that has already moved on. It's dirty money. It has to be. She wasn't worried about me going to prison. She was terrified because the bankrupt daughter's script had been shredded. I had introduced a variable she couldn't control. I had given them the one thing they loved more than their own pride, and it was eating them alive from the inside out. 1,200 hours, midday. The sun was a dull coin in the sky. I sat at my desk and opened the group chat. Garrett was leaning against the doorframe, his fingers tapping a rhythmic, tactical beat against the wood. I typed the message. No emojis, no fluff. Just the after-action report. The deal for the defense system was finalized 12 days ago. Total payout, $14 million. Cash. It never fell through. There was no crisis. I tested you, all of you, and you failed with flying colors. In 11 days, you listed my childhood bedroom on Airbnb. You uninvited me from the wedding because I was bad for the optics. You erased me while I was supposedly at my lowest. I paused. I could almost feel the oxygen leaving the room in Naperville. The $50,000 I sent each of you is real. Consider it a final settlement, a liquidation of our relationship. It is the severance pay for 9 years of acting as your unpaid logistics officer. The contract is terminated, effective immediately. I hit send. The silence that followed was absolute. The Hall family network had flatlined. 1,900 hours. The evening shadows were long and jagged. The phone rang one last time. Diane. I picked up and hit the speakerphone. I wanted Garrett to hear the sound of a dying empire. Laura, how dare you? Her voice was a jagged rasp, high-pitched and vibrating with a fake, theatrical grief. How dare you pull this stunt right before Kelsey's big day? You are a cold, cruel woman. We are your family. We raised you. The selfishness was breathtaking. Even now, with 50 grand in her pocket, she was screaming about the timing of her own discomfort. I looked at Garrett. He gave a single, sharp nod. I leaned into the mic. My voice was a dead calm. You put my room on Airbnb for $89 a night, Diane. You threw away my nameplate and replaced it with a guest pillow. You didn't raise a daughter. You managed an asset. For 34 years, I made it about you, about Kelsey, about the family name. I took a breath, feeling the cold, clean air fill my lungs. For the first time in my life, I've decided it's about me. Don't call this number again. I tapped the red icon. The line cut. But I knew my family. I knew the blue-collar hunger for more. The money wouldn't be enough to keep them quiet. The real punishment wasn't my words. It was what they were going to do with that cash the moment the sun came up. If you've ever reached the point where you realize that your family was just a business that didn't value its employees, hit that like button right now. We are building our own unit here. Drop a comment with the word truth. If you know that no amount of money can buy back a soul once it's been sold, make sure to subscribe because tomorrow morning the wedding starts and the truth is about to walk right down the aisle. I stood up and walked to the window. The lights of the suburbs were coming on. It looked peaceful. It was a lie. Tomorrow, the bill was finally coming due. Morning of day 13 arrived with the kind of gray light that makes the Illinois suburbs look like a graveyard for ambition. I sat at the kitchen island. My coffee was lukewarm. A thin skin had formed on the surface of the black liquid. My phone was a persistent, nagging itch on the granite. It was vibrating every few minutes with a fresh notification. Diane had been busy. I checked her Facebook page. She'd posted a picture of a wilting rose with a caption about a mother's silent tears and the pain of an ungrateful child. It was classic Diane, the theater of the victim. She wanted the neighbors in Naperville to pity her. She wanted the church ladies to whisper about the daughter who had lost her mind and her money. On Instagram, Kelsey was posting black and white photos of herself staring out a window. "Stronger than I look," the caption said, moving forward despite the shadows. But my Bank of America app told a much different story. A story written in cold, hard numbers. By 10 a.m., the truth of the Hall family was laid bare. Within 18 hours of receiving the severance pay, all three of them, Roger, Diane, and Kelsey had logged into their accounts. They didn't call to ask if I was okay. They didn't send a single message of concern. They didn't even mention the money in their public posts of grief. They just moved. Roger was the first. He drained the full $50,000 before the sun was even up, probably thinking about the dues for the private club. Diane followed at noon, then Kelsey. By 2 p.m., the $150,000 I had sent was gone, vanished into their private vaults. They were screaming to the world that I was a monster, a bankrupt failure with a cold heart. But their hands were busy stuffing my severance into their pockets. They didn't care where the money came from. They didn't care that it was earned in the dust of Iraq while they slept in silk. They only cared that the fountain was flowing again. I watched the final notification clear the bar, $0 remaining in the temporary transfer account. "They took it all," I said. My voice was a dry rattle in the quiet kitchen. Garrett was standing by the window. He was watching a mail truck crawl down the street. He didn't look surprised. He was a risk analyst. He'd already run the numbers on their souls. "Every cent," Garrett replied. He turned to look at me. His eyes were like flint. "They spent the last 48 hours telling everyone you were a broken asset. Now they are treating you like a lottery win. They didn't even wait for the wedding to be over to secure the cash." I felt a surge of something. It wasn't pain anymore. It was a deep, oily kind of scorn. A realization that I had spent 34 years protecting people who were fundamentally hollow. I had been the armor for a void. Day 14, the wedding day. The air was heavy and smelled of impending rain. I stayed in my house. I didn't go to the salon. I didn't put on the dress I'd bought 6 months ago. Instead, I sat in my home office with the lights off. My phone buzzed. It was Nora. She was at the venue in downtown Chicago. She was my eyes on the ground. She started sending video clips, short, shaky bursts of the perfect day. The first clip was the ballroom. It was spectacular. I saw the lighting systems I'd argued over for 3 weeks. I saw the floral arrangements, the peonies Kelsey had begged me to fix, standing in tall glass vases. The guests were dressed in designer suits and evening gowns. They were laughing. They were drinking the premium champagne I'd secured at a discount. They were eating the filet mignon I had personally taste tested 6 months prior. Kelsey appeared in the next clip. She was a vision in white lace. She looked radiant. She was holding a glass of bubbly, spinning in a circle while the photographer's flashbulbs popped like distant gunfire. She looked like she didn't have a care in the world. Why would she? She had a wedding paid for by a bankrupt sister and $50,000 of fresh cash in her account. She was celebrating a life built on my sweat. And I was a ghost. A name they had scrubbed from the seating chart to avoid embarrassment. Garrett stood behind me, watching the screen. He saw the way the guests were enjoying the open bar. He saw Roger in his new tuxedo, shaking hands like a man who hadn't just stolen from his own child. "Look at them, Laura," Garrett whispered. "That is the Hall family business model. You provide the infrastructure. They provide the smile for the camera. And they don't even have the decency to feel guilty about it." He was right. If Diane had truly been hurt, she would have sent the $50,000 back. She would have thrown it in my face to prove she didn't need my dirty money. But the greed was too strong. It was their primary motivator. My departure wasn't a tragedy to them. It was a profit margin. They had successfully liquidated the daughter and kept the dividend. I watched the final video. Kelsey and Roger were doing the father-daughter dance. The song was something sappy and sentimental. The crowd was dabbing their eyes. It was a perfect performance of family love. It was a masterpiece of American suburban hypocrisy. I felt the last thread snap. I didn't cry. I didn't want to throw the phone. I just turned it off. The screen went black, and for the first time in a decade, the noise stopped. I was no longer the invisible backbone. I was just a woman in a quiet room. I picked up my car keys. I grabbed the red folder from the desk. My decommissioning papers. "Where are you going?" Garrett asked. "Chicago," I said. I stood up. My back was a straight line. My shoulders were square. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the officer. The wedding is over. The party is done. Now it's time to talk to Claudia. I walked out to my car. The engine turned over with a low, predatory growl. I backed out of the driveway without looking at the Naperville house one last time. I hit the Interstate 88 East. The Chicago skyline was a jagged silhouette against the darkening clouds. The city looked cold. It looked hard. It looked like the law. The Hall family thought they had won. They thought they had the money and the reputation. They thought the audit was over. They were wrong. I wasn't just leaving. I was building a cage. And the first bars were already being forged in a lawyer's office downtown. I looked in the rearview mirror. The suburbs were fading into the gray mist. I wasn't looking back. I was looking for the throat. Claudia's office was flooded with the kind of late-afternoon Chicago sun that offered no warmth. It only served to highlight the dust motes dancing in the sterile air. I sat in a high-backed leather chair, watching the shadows stretch across her mahogany desk like long, dark fingers. I wasn't there for mediation. I wasn't there to find a middle ground or fix a broken bridge. I was there to build a concrete wall with razor wire on top, a legal perimeter. I need the formal notice drafted, I said. My voice was a flat line, no anger, no tremor, just the steady tone of a briefing. I want the rules of engagement clearly defined. From this second forward, any attempt at contact from Diane, Roger, or Kelsey Hall goes through this office. No phone calls, no midnight texts, no accidental run-ins at the grocery store. If they step over the line, I want the harassment laws triggered. I want them to understand that the daughter they knew is decommissioned. Claudia didn't offer any platitudes. She was a professional who understood the weight of a hostile takeover. She nodded, her fingers hitting the keys of her laptop with the rhythmic precision of a metronome. The sound filled the quiet room, a mechanical death knell for a relationship that had been dead for a long time. She was drafting the cease and desist order, a document that would legally codify the vacuum I was creating around my life. I was cutting the power lines. I was shutting down the frequency they had used to manipulate me for a decade. The stapler on the corner of the desk was a heavy industrial piece of cold steel. I reached for it. My movements were slow and deliberate. I had 3 piles of paper in front of me, 3 dossiers of betrayal. I took the first set. Clack. The sound echoed like a hammer hitting a nail. That was the Airbnb screenshot, the $89 price tag my mother had put on my childhood sanctuary. Clack. Kelsey's text message uninviting me from her wedding because my bankruptcy was bad for the family optics. Clack. The printed logs from the secret Hall family updates group chat where they laughed at my military boots and my cold personality while they planned how to spend my money. The last staple was for the spreadsheet, the KPI ledger. The document where Diane had calculated the exact return on investment for my trauma. Clack. The sound was final. I slid the 3 identical folders across the desk to Claudia. I wanted the family to see the evidence. I wanted them to know that I had the receipts for every lie and every act of exploitation. Manipulators thrive in the gray areas of memory, but they choke on the black ink of a balance sheet. They couldn't use tears to rewrite the numbers. They couldn't gaslight a certified bank statement. I pulled a single sheet of plain white paper toward me. No letterhead, no fancy borders, just a black ballpoint pen. I wrote the final words myself. It was my closing argument. I have spent 9 years functioning as an entry in your family ledger, I wrote. The ink was dark and thick. I was a high-yield asset, a reliable supply line. When I reported a depletion of resources, you decommissioned me in 11 days. You didn't lose a daughter, you lost a donor. This door is now locked. Do not knock. Do not call. There is no longer a balance for you to withdraw. This is not about anger. It is about a total liquidation of the debt I thought I owed you. I folded the paper. The crease was sharp enough to draw blood. I didn't look back at the desk. I stood up, my back a straight line, my shoulders squared. I felt the old weight of the body armor, but this time it was invisible. It was made of law and resolve. The drive to the Cook County Post Office was a blur of gray asphalt and the jagged Chicago skyline. The city felt cold and hard, and for the first time, I felt like I fit in. I parked the car and killed the engine. The silence was absolute. I grabbed the 3 brown manila envelopes from the passenger seat. They were rough to the touch, the grain of the paper catching on my skin. Inside the post office, the air smelled of wet pavement and fluorescent light. I didn't go to the automated kiosk. I stood at the counter and waited for the clerk. I wanted the paper trail. I wanted the signature. Certified mail, restricted delivery, I said. The clerk didn't look up. He just weighed the envelopes and printed the tracking labels. I watched as he slapped the green stickers onto the brown paper. Those envelopes didn't weigh much, less than an ounce each, but they carried the weight of 34 years of being a tool. They carried the weight of every cent of hazard pay I'd bled for in the dirt of Iraq. I took the receipts and tucked them into my pocket. Then, I walked to the metal mail slot. I held the envelopes over the dark opening. I didn't hesitate. I didn't pray for a different outcome. I let them go. They hit the bottom of the bin with a dry, hollow sound. Thud. The connection was severed. The minefield had been cleared. The invisible leash that had kept me tied to the Hall family's whims was finally cut. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped back out into the Chicago wind. It was biting, freezing, and honest. I took a breath, feeling the cold air fill my lungs until it hurt. I didn't look at the post office. I didn't look at the tracking numbers. I just walked to my car and let the door slam with a heavy, solid thud. I was done being an infrastructure. I was done being a guest. I put the car in gear and headed home. The fallout did not happen with a bang. It happened with quiet, pathetic whimpers. 3 months after the certified letters hit their doormats, the Hall Family Corporation finally filed for emotional bankruptcy. I watched from a distance, like a drone pilot monitoring a target already burning. Diane went to Facebook. She posted a photo of a single empty chair in her dining room. The caption was a masterpiece of suburban theater. When you give your children everything and they still cast you aside, a mother's heart never heals, praying for lost souls. It was a fishing trip for sympathy. She wanted likes and comments from the choir of enablers, but the theater had an audience that knew the script. Nora did not hesitate. She dropped a comment right under that post. Laura just cashed a $14 million check for her own hard work, Diane. She does not need your chair, and she definitely does not need your debt. The post was gone in 4 minutes. Scrubbed. Diane realized the bankrupt daughter lie was dead. She tried to play the pride card next. A week later, a check for $50,000 arrived at the office. No note. She was trying to buy back her dignity. But the ledger told the real story. She kept the profit from the Airbnb room. She kept the interest. She returned the capital, but could not return the gain. Typical. Roger remained silent. I heard he started seeing a therapist in Wheaton. Does he talk about the daughter who paid for his heart surgery? Or does he talk about the asset he lost? Probably the latter. Kelsey is still Kelsey. She is busy posting photos of her dream life. Her wedding was a massive production, but the honeymoon was paid for on a high-interest credit card. She is living the American dream of debt and delusion. I have been discharged. Today, the air in Naperville is different. It is early autumn. The heat has lost its teeth, and the wind carries the scent of charcoal. I'm standing in my backyard. It is not a mansion. It is a home. The grass is thick under my boots. I can hear the sizzle of the grill. Garrett is flipping burgers, a beer in one hand and a spatula in the other. He looks at me and gives a small, knowing nod. No words, just the understanding of 2 people who survived a war. Nora is here. She's sitting on the porch steps, laughing with Jess. Jess is healthy now. She's working on the new contracts. She's part of the unit. There are kids running around the yard, screaming with joy that has not been categorized in a spreadsheet yet. They are not investments. They are not high-yield assets. They are just children. This is the new team, the chosen family. In the Army, they teach you that loyalty is earned in the mud. It is not a byproduct of biology. You do not owe someone your soul just because you share a last name. I used to think the Hall family was a fortress. I thought those walls were load-bearing. I thought if I stopped holding them up, the whole world would come down on my head. But I was wrong. Those walls were not stone. They were just thin dividers made of greed. They were built to keep me in, not to keep the world out. Major Laura Hall received her termination notice, and instead of crying, I took the wrecking ball to the rest of it. I knocked down the fake history. I cleared the field. And when the dust settled, I realized the only thing that mattered was still standing. I'm not a line item. I'm not a guest in my own life. I take a sip of my lemonade. I watch the sun dip below the fence. It is beautiful. For the first time in 34 years, I do not feel the weight of someone else's debt. I do not have to scan the room for an exit. I am out. I look at you now, the one listening to this. I know you are out there. I know you are the one who stays up late doing the math for people who never say thank you. I know you are the one being told that family means you must accept being a tool. Listen to me. You are not a receipt. You are not a supply line. You are a person of value, and that value is not determined by how much you can provide to people who only love you when your hands are full. If the people in your life only see you as a donor, then you have every right to shut down the accounts. Do not be afraid of the silence. The silence is where you finally hear your own voice. Thank you for being part of Noble Revenge. This mission is over, but yours might just be beginning. If this story hit you, hit that like button. Leave a comment below with the word stand. Tell me your story. Let others know they are not alone. Subscribe to the channel. We are building a unit here, one survivor at a time. Keep your own back straight. Keep your eyes on the horizon. You are the commanding officer of your own life. Dismissed.